Mga milenyo, pagod ka na ba galing sa trabaho? At gutom na sa maghapong pagtatrabaho, pero wala kang pagkain sa bahay? Narito na ang sagot mga katropa, ang super manok lechon. Napapawi sa inyong gutom at siguradong mapapa-analyze ka dahil sa tender juicy na jumbo pa at siguradong malinis at bagong katay buhat sa farm. Kaya super masalasa at pangmasa pa. Ano pa hinihintay nyo mga katropa? Takbo na sa Super Manok Panteño Siniluan at bumili na. Baka maabusan ka, katropa.
Ngayon, just to continue, Mr. Clyde Teves, the person named in the search warrant, was not around during the implementation of the search.
Talakay. Representative. Opinion. Palawakin. Aksyonan. Kasama si ROCEL dito na sa New Millennial 9 TV.
Barangay, pangunahing unit ng pamahalang lokal kung saan dito pinag-uusapan ang bawat sigalot ng mga residente ng bawat barangay. Dito rin pinag-uusapan ng mga piling halal na opisyal na barangay ang mga proyekto para sa kanilang barangay. Kumustahin natin ang panunungkulan ni Kapitan dito sa Dama Barangay sa Millennial Online TV worldwide, ang katropa ng bawat barangay.
Ating tinatapos ang ating pagpupulong. Maraming salamat po sa inyong pagdalo at tapos na po ang ating session. Enjoy na po tayo.
Responsable ka ng gun owner? At mahaba ba ang iyong pasensya? At hindi ba inti ng iyong ulo? Alam mo rin ba ang batas hinggil sa pag-iingat ng baril o firearms? Kung hindi,
A responsible gun owner?
Are you 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 a responsible gun owner? The PNP Civil Security Group would like to advise all firearms holders to renew their license to own and possess firearms and firearms registration within 6 months before its expiry date. Tumawag na at makipag-ugnayan.
Be a responsible gun owner.
One Gun Pilipinas ang sagot mga katropa at kagangers. Tayo ituturo sa inyo ng One Gun Pilipinas o OGP ang lahat ng legal na paraan at proseso upang ikaw ay maging isang responsableng gun owners. Ano pa hinihintay nyo mga kagamers? Sali na sa One Gun Pilipinas ngayon na! Oras ng hudyat, alas 8:03 ng gabi, Philippine Standard Time. At sasanyo na po ang programang Tropa, talakayin, rebisahin, opinyon palawakin, aksyonan, Tropa. At syempre po, ako yung makakasama, ROCEL LOPEZ at your service. At syempre po, magandang umaga, magandang tanghali, magandang gabi, Pilipinas. Magandang gabi sa iyo, Los Biminda. Luzon, Visayas at Mindanao. At ngayon nga pa mga kaibigan, mga katropa, ay Monday edition ng programang Tropa. Siyempre dito lang sa Millennial Online TV, News and Updates. At siyempre, tulad natin sinabi, ROCEL LOPEZ sa inyong makakasama. At sa ating technical side ay siyempre si Mr. J, ang ating mahusay, magiting, at matalinong estudyante po ito, si Mr. J. Kaya magandang gabi sa iyo, Mr. J. Ayan. At yun mga kaibigan, at ako ngayon po ay araw ng Lunes, ika-24 na po ng buwan ng Pebrero, taong 2025, may 24 na. Hanggang ano ba ang February 29? No, di kung ano tayo ngayon na 24, di 5 days to go na lang, no? At magiging Marso na. At magandang gabi sa ating mga katropa, sa ating mga kuya, ate, bunso at friends of Eagles. At syempre po sa partikular sa Central Luzon Region 45, Media Rider Eagles Club. Ayun, nakita ko na sa monitor yung ating kuya, yung ating secretary sa club, no? Yung ating si Kuya Ford Tom, no? Si Kuya Anthony Bautista. Ayun. At si Rose Gagala, ayan, good evening daw, watching from Valenzuela, yun, si Rose Gagala. Ayan, magandang gabi sa iyo, Ate Rose. Welcome sa programang Tropa. Ayan, watching to po from Valenzuela City, ayun. At si Ford Tom naman, si Kuya Ford Tom, from Malabon City. Yung kanyang Ford Tom nga pala, yung ating mga katropa dyan, yung ating mga kuya, ate, kahit sino sa inyo, kung kayo po may mga bag, mga sapatos, mga buckles, no, na gustong ipa-customize, pwedeng ipagawa, meron po tayong mga sapatos dyan, i-re-reglue. Yun naman pong mga bag na nag-fade ang kulay ay pwede hong i-restore, pagagandahin po ulit. Siyempre, saan yan? Diyan lang po sa Ford Tom, no? Kuya Anthony, nakalimutan ko yung aking tarpaulin. Di bale, babalikan na lang, At yun po, kung kayo magpapakustomize, pwede po kayong kumontak po sa Ford Tom, no? Shoes and bags customize, ayan. Kasi po, yung, at may mga bag kayong, halimbawa, Louis Vuitton, na yung nag-paid na ho yung parang pinaka-buckles ng bag, at saka yung strap, ipe-plate po ulit yan, ipe-plating po ulit yan ng Ford Tom at babalik sa maganda, no? Parang bago ulit. Ganon din sa sapatos nyo, no? Kaya kumontak lang kayo, o kung di nyo naman makontak, pwede kayong kumontak sa Millennial Online TV at saka natin ibibigay sa inyo ang contact number ng Ford Tom. Ayun. At kay Ate Rose Gagala ng Valenzuela City, siya nga sa Valenzuela, Ate Rose, magandang gabi sa iyo. Welcome sa programang Tropa. At ayun mga kaibigan, mamaya po itutunghay natin sa inyo. Alam nyo, dyan sa may area ng Malabon City ay continuous yung pamimigay ng local government unit nung tinatawag na Malabon Ahon Blue Card. No? Ito pong Malabon Blue Ahon Card ay composed po yan ng may makukuha kayong mga ayuda. Ito po ay per family. No? Kasi po, nung unang bigayan ay mayroon nung nabigyan marami. Pero marami pa rin nung hindi nakakuha. Kaya continuous po yung kanilang pagtanggap. Kaya nagtapos po yan ay nung Sabado yata, kung di ako nagkakamali, no? Linggo, no? Doon nagtapos po ang muling pagbibigay. Kasi hindi ko alam kung second wave o kung third wave ng pamimigay ng mga Malabon Ahon Blue Card sa mga residente po ng lungsod ng Malabon. Patuloy po yung ginawa nila. Ito po lahat. Siyempre, magbebenepisyo dyan ay mga taga-lungsod ng Malabon, no? At yun, siyempre sayang din yung ayuda. Actually, may naririnig ako before na may nakukuha pong mga bigas, groceries, etc. Siyempre, yan ay sa handog, no? Kabutihang handog po ng siyempre ng mayor ng lungsod ng Malabon, walang iba kundi si Mayor Jeannie Sandoval. Ayun, sabi ni Ponton, salamat kuya sa masarap na ulam kanina. Abay, siyempre, kita mo naman pag tayong tumira, di ba? At sabi ni Rose Gagala, may message po ako, sir. Sana po mapansin. Salamat po. Oo, sige. At titignan ko na lang mamaya. May kawayan po, sir. Kala ko ba Bulacan? Oo, ngayon may kawayan. Oo, yan si Ma'am Rose Gagala. Okay? Okay, sa mga kaibigan, tuloy-tuloy tayo. At huwag na natin patagalin. Panoorin natin yung senaryo doon po sa ginawang pamimigay ng Malabon Ahon Blue Card para sa mga residente po ng Malabon dahil nagpunta po tayo at yun po yung sinagawa sa Fisher Mall dyan po sa lungsod ng Malabon. So narito po mga katropa.
bagong umaga, bumangon at magbikas. Tayong lahat ay patungo sa langit ng pag-unlad. Sabay tayo sa paglakad, sabay ang ating yapak, habang sa isang tinig, ganito ang ating awit. Malabon, mahal nating bayan, tayo ang siyang mga kawal. Walang kaba ang dibdib pagkat ako, ikaw ay kapit-bisig. Malabon ang ating tahanan, dito ay may bayanihan. Isigaw natin sa daigdig, tayo'y isang bayan, isang awit, isang tinig. Malabon, mahal nating bayan, tayo ang siyang mga kawal. Walang kaba ang dibdib pagkat ako, ikaw ay kapit-bisig. Malabon ang ating tahanan, dito ay may bayanihan. Sigaw natin sa daigdig, tayo'y isang bayan, isang awit, isang tinig. Ito ang bagong umaga, bumangon. Ito ang bagong umaga, bumangon at magbikas. Tayong lahat ay patungo sa langit ng pag-unlad. Sabay tayo sa paglakad, sabay ang ating yapak, habang sa isang tinig, ganito ang ating awit. Malabon, mahal nating bayan, tayo ang siyang mga kawal. Walang kaba ang dibdib pagkat ako, ikaw ay kapit-bisig. Malabon ang ating tahanan, dito ay may bayanihan. Isigaw natin sa daigdig, tayo'y isang bayan, isang awit, isang tinig. Malabon, mahal nating bayan.
Yan po mga katropa, mga Malabreño, no, yan po ang senaryo po na sinagawa sa pamimigay ng Malabon Ahon Blue Card dyan po sa may 5th floor, no, ng Fisher Mall dyan sa lungsod ng Malabon. Nakita niyo po napakarami pa rin tao. So katwid, marami po hindi nabibigyan ng nasabing Malabon Ahon Blue Card. Kaya po yan ay tinatapos. Gusto po ng Mayora o ni Mayor Jenny Sandoval na lahat po ng mga taga Malabon ay mabigyan ng nasabing Malabon Ahon Blue Card.
Tayo'y isang bayan, isang awit, isang tinig. Ito ang bagong umaga, bumangon.
Okay, so yan mga kaibigan, napanood nyo po no, yung senaryo ng ginagawang distribution at registration ng Malabon Ahon Blue Card dyan po sa may Fisher Mall sa Malabon City, na kung saan nga po ay marami po na hindi pa nabibigyan talaga ng Malabon Ahon Blue Card, na yun nga po ay doon po pinadadala o binibigay ng pamahalaan ng lungsod ng Malabon ang mga ayuda no, sa bawat pamilya ng Malabon, ang mga Malabueño, no? So yun po ang card, at meron po yung parang ATM card, at yun nga po, at pero meron pong nakukuwang ayuda, no? So napakaganda po ng proyekto ng ating butihing Mayor Jeannie Sandoval para sa mga taga-lungsod ng Malabon. Okay, so tuloy-tuloy tayo mga kaibigan sa oras na alas 8:15 no, ng gabi, Philippine Standard Time, ay tuloy-tuloy tayo, at ngayon naman mga kaibigan, mga katropa, ay itutungay po natin sa inyo yung pong ginawang kapihan naman sa Senado. Ito politika naman, no? Ito po tungkol sa partido, ano? Ng partido nitong si Senate Minority Pro Leader Senator Coco Pimentel, no? Kung saan parang alam nyo, pagka mga partido talaga magulo no? Minsan parang nagkakaroon na hindi mawawala inggitan, etc. whatsoever. Alamin natin, no? Dito po sa ginawang kapihan sa Senado, na kung saan nga po pinangunahan ni Senator Coco Pimentel. Narito po.
Use the party name. Sir, kuha lang ng reaction niyo po. Thank you.
Yung kaso namin sa COMELEC was about the leadership of the party. Sira pala ulo nila. Sasabihin nila sa akin na hindi pa nila ako kinikick out sa party. Tapos aangal sila na ando pa sa existing stationery ko yung PDP laban, di ba?
So may karapatan pa kayo, sir, na gamit?
Well, under dispute pa yung
sa Supreme Court.
Yung decision ng COMELEC na sila kusi naman ang nagwagi, under dispute pa sa Supreme Court. So malay natin, marireverse pa yan. But then at the same time, si kusi mismo sinasabihan ako na hindi naman daw nila ako in-expel sa partido nila. Ayoko lang makasama sila, pero hindi nila ako in-expel. So bakit aangal ngayon sila kung gamit ko pa ang PDP laban na partido ko namang tunay yan, partido ng father ko, at ako nagbumuhay niyan hanggang sa time ng kaso ng COMELEC.
Sir, sinabi rin po nila na refrain from misusing the name PDP Laban and misleading daw the Filipino people about your current party affiliation kasi daw po nag-transfer na kayo sa nationalista.
Well, yung nationalista certificate of nomination ko, that was with the National Assembly kasi kami ng PDP laban ko yung wing ko, yung faction ko pa, yung originals. Nag-National Assembly kami, and they gave me permission, as well as si Senator Manny Pacquiao, na for purposes of the May 2025 elections, we can use another party's CONA. So lahat po yan anticipated na namin yan, lahat po yan covered na po namin. So we are still with PDP laban. In case we win the case sa Supreme Court, we are ready to assume leadership, legally speaking, of our own party. So, but in the meantime, yung paggamit namin ng other parties CONA, allowed by our original faction of the PDP laban in a National Assembly, very specific, plus alam din po nung hosting party. Alam po.
So, sir, you are running under what party?
Ngayon, Nationalista Party.
NP.
NP.
So, yung PDP na ginagamit nyo, PDP laban, yung kanilang mga senatorial candidates, hindi nyo ini-endorso?
Hindi. Hindi namin ini-endorso yun. May kaso pa kami sa Supreme Court.
And then, anong dating sa inyo, sir, nung mga nagiging parang patutsadahan, batikusan yung remarks ni former President Duterte na patayin yung 15 senador para makapasok yung kanyang pambato sa senatorial race. Anong dating sa inyo, sir, noon?
Delikado yung mga ganong salita. Sana i-discourage na yun. Although sabi ko, paubayan na natin yan sa mga investigators, kasi pwede nga pasok talaga yan din sa sedition ba yun? When you call for violence against government officials, pasok kasi yan sa definition ng sedition. So, paubayan na natin sa DOJ, sa NBI, if they feel na in the totality of the circumstances, may kaso ba o wala. Pero, i-ano natin yan, i-discourage natin yan. Mahirap yung sasabihin, joke lang. Kung mag-research kayo ngayon, may kaso ngayon sa Australia. Yung may dalawang nurses na of Arab origin, nag-anti-Jewish sentiment sila sa online. Ngayon, binabalikan sila, sabi nila, joke only. Ang sabi ng mga Australian law enforcers doon at saka government officials, hindi pwedeng bayaan natin itong mga ganitong delikadong mga pananalita na calling for violence.
Pero the mere fact na dating ang Pangulo, dapat hindi natin inaasahan yung mga ganung pananalita sa kanya.
Ayun na nga, pero nung Pangulo siya, madalas din natin marinig yun.
Sir, di ba yung Presidential Decree 1727 again penalizes bomb jokes?
Yes. Meron.
So, pwede siya doon?
I do not know the context ng bomb joke yata. Anywhere ba yan? Or in the airport context yata?
Mukhang anywhere, if I'm understanding this right, 1727.
I'm no longer familiar with the PD. So, yun na nga. Kaya nga sabi ko, the DOJ, the NBI must be more familiar with all of the other criminal laws.
Okay.
Pero sir, hindi factor kung na-feel threatened yung mga senators. Kasi for example, si SP, ang sinasabi niya, hindi naman sila na-threaten, yung mga senador, wala naman nagko-complain among the senators, so dapat wala na daw kaso yan.
Hindi naman ito parang private crime eh. Alam ko yung mga ganyang prinsipyo sa private crime lang yan, na kailangan yung tao mismong apektado ang magrereklamo. So, this is actually in the nature of a public crime. If it is a crime, kaya i-ano ko na muna. Wala akong expertise na doon sa bomb joke law. So, PD, ano sabi? Just give us time, i-research din po namin. Pero sana ginagawa na ng DOJ at saka ng NBI yung research.
So, bagamat sabi niyo, dapat dinidiscourage yung gano'ng mga statement, pero knowing the former president, hindi po kayo na-threatened sa gano'ng pahayag ng dating Pangulo?
Hindi ako threatened na sinabi niya. Ang problema kasi is may mga followers siya eh.
May danger, sir.
Malay mo, hindi nila alam sa yung iba, hindi joke yun.
Sir, nagsabi na po kasi NBI na hindi naman nila iimbestigahan.
Hindi ko na ima-micromanage ang NBI. Kung ayaw na ng NBI, so be it. So be it.
Pero sir, yung mga negative campaigning, according kasi kay COMELEC Commissioner George Garcia, under Omnibus Election Code, parang inaalaw yun. Do you think it's about time i-amend ang Omnibus Election Code para ma-dissuade na yung mga negative campaigning?
Yung positive, ito nga, napansin ko na yung negative campaigning noon pa, kaya research ko na yan noon pa, mga 3 elections ago pa o 4 elections ago. Yung positive campaigning, kailangan mo identify sarili mo, di ba? Kunyari, mag-aalalagay ka ng ad o maggagawa ka ng mga printed materials paid for by, then the candidate paid by, then the payor plus the name and address. Dapat ang negative campaign ganun din. Kung sakaling ipi-place ang mga negative campaign, kasi tama siya, pagbasa ko rin ng election code noon, allowed. But, ang problema nila, pinapayagan nila yung mga pailalim na tira eh. Dapat, pag may negative campaigning ka, ilabas mo na rin. Dapat nandun paid for and paid by. Pero malabo yung paid for. Siguro, paid by. Kasi it's against a candidate. Ilabas. Dapat hindi pwedeng nakatago. Because it is actually allowed.
So, okay lang na allowed yun, sir.
Pero proper na negative campaign. Wag botohin si pwede yun. Pero wag yung mga chismis or whatever, libelous. May kaso ka pa rin.
Okay. JC.
Hi, Sen. Good morning po. Other topic lang po.
Yes.
SC sets or oral argument on Maharlika Investment Fund po. Sir, saan nakatanggap na po ba kayo ng kopya po ng SC Reso with regard po dun sa oral arguments po?
Yung council namin, mag-meeting na kami. Nakita ko na, nabasa ko na rin yung gusto nila mga topics na i-discuss.
Okay. Any other question? Okay. Ma'am.
Sir, ano na pong update dun sa kaso po ninyo sa Marikina?
Okay. Ang case naman sa Marikina, hindi naman ako yung affected, di ba? Kasi
Oo, yung kalaban ninyo.
ang na-disqualify si Mayor Marcy Teodoro ng division. So I think he has appealed it sa MR, ang tawag dyan, motion for reconsideration, which is treated as an automatic appeal sa NBank. So it's pending sa NBank. Siguro bumibuelo lang ang NBank kasi may dalawang nag-retire eh. So may dalawang new appointees. So bigyan din natin ng time yung dalawang new members na acclimatize.
Sir, paano yun kung nakalagay na po siya dun sa balota?
Okay lang po yun. Actually, it's safer na nandun ang pangalan kasi mas madali na yung if you are disqualified, sasabihin lang ng COMELEC, we will not count. We will not count your votes, or even if your votes are counted, they will not be given any effect. So, yun. So mas safer yung may andun yung pangalan kaysa sa wala yung pangalan tapos sasabihin ng higher court na hindi pala siya disqualified, hindi mo na mapiprint yun. So that's the more cautious way of doing things, na i-print mo muna lahat ng pangalan tapos may time naman sa dulo pa, kahit ano yung resulta, you can say na walang effect yung boto nung disqualified.
Pero sir, the mere fact na incumbent mayor po itong kalaban ninyo, mabigat po bang kalaban kapag nakaupo yung kalaban sa...
Undefeated ito eh. Mabigat po. He is an undefeated politician in Marikina. Pero hindi yun ang issue. Ang issue rito is in running as a member of the House of Representatives, hawak pa ba niya lahat ng qualifications? Kasi he did something, he moved to another district. Yun eh. He moved this registration to another district. Yun. So pagbalik, na-violate na yung 1-year residency requirement.
So anong plano nyo? Paano nyo dadalhin sir yung kampanya nyo considering na ang kalaban nyo nakaupong mayor ng Marikina?
That traditional way lang of campaigning, winning the hearts and minds of the people. So may track record naman si mayor as mayor, may track record naman ako as public servant, as legislator. Ang tinatakbuhan namin is as legislator. So pwede na. Meron din tayong K.
At the mere fact na at the mere fact na legitimate na taga Marikina kayo, sir.
Ay, opo. 50 years na po ako dyan sa Marikina.
How many voters do you have in Marikina?
Doon sa District 1, 130,000. Sa buong Marikina would be around 300,000.
Sir, may patanong lang si Nympha. Yung request nyo na magkaroon ng caucus yung mga senadora, susulatan nyo po ba si SP Cheese at ano yung subject ng second letter nyo sa kanya?
Kung pwede kong ma-personal makausap si Cheese, sasabihin ko na. Pero yung sasabihin ko sa kanya, i-reduce ko pa rin in writing. Okay. So mag-request ako ng caucus para ma-explain niya yung position niya sa mga senators, pabigyan niya rin ako ng time, i-explain ko yung position ko. So yun po yung laman ng aking second letter sa kanya.
So hanggang ngayon, wala pang initial response si SP do sa unang letter niyo sa kanya?
Wala pa in writing. In writing, pero nandun na yun. Sinagot na yata ako sa press con. Kaya So ganun na lang, magsagutan na lang kami sa media.
Pero kung nandito siya, sir, kakausapin niyo personally.
Okay naman kami ni SP Cheese.
SP, andito ka ba ngayon?
Pag same floor naman kami. Bandaanan ko na siya.
Okay. Any additional question? No more? Okay.
Sir, there's a new PCO secretary.
Yeah.
Who I understand is...
Dati mong staff.
What do you mean?
Tinext ko nga siya Sabi ko, ginulat mo naman ako rito. Hindi ko alam na. Si Cesar, kaibigan ko rin yun. Kumpare ko yun. Kasama ko sa National Youth Commission si Cesar. Pero, sure na ba yun? Is that confirmed already? Si Jay?
Cesar Chavez already announced.
Na si Jay na is the answer.
Knowing Jay bilang dating staff, is he qualified for that position?
Yes, of course. Kilala nyo rin si Jay, di ba? You know him, and then you work with the giant media company, and he's also Ilocano.
So you think that was a factor?
But I don't think so kasi si Cesar naman sa Bicolano. So hindi it wasn't a factor pero he's qualified si Jay.
Sir, may implication ba yun, yung madalas na pagpapalit ng PCO? Parang may problema ba? May
Baka mahirap i-manage ang opisinang yan. Hindi ko alam eh. Wala akong personal knowledge sa politics ng mga ng media eh. So baka mahirap patakbuhin yung opisina na yan. Kasi actually ang PCO kasi parang pinagsasamang iba-ibang, 'di ba? Napansin natin sa budget process yan eh. Iba-ibang mga opisina pilit na pinagsasama sa isang departamento. So, I hope si Jay can do it with his pleasing personality. I-PR niya lahat yan, pagtsagaan niya lahat yan. So, hintayin na lang natin. We wish him all the best. No?
And then the new, DOTR Secretary, sir. Sa tingin niyo madaling makakalusot yun sa CA?
Sa tingin ko.
Dating staff din ng mga dating staff.
Nila Alan naman yan. Yeah, so basta alam ni Vince yung pinapasok niya. I mean, ganun din yan. Parang same nature like a PCO yan kasi iba-ibang air, rail, land, water, transportation, sea. Iba-iba rin. So iba-ibang disciplines. So we wish the new members of the President's Cabinet, we wish them all the best kasi isang bansa lang naman tayo. So we want our government to succeed because our country will also benefit and our people. So.
Ay sir, starting today, in-implement na yung National Food Emergency ba yun?
Disposal, the movement of those nakastock. Pamigay na yan or ipamigay or ibenta na yan at very affordable prices habang pwede pa siya sa fit for human consumption pa. Pero ito lang po yung aking bigla ko lang itong naisip eh. Yung presyo ng bigas sa merkado, hindi ba parang artificially high din siya? Bakit ko nasasabi yun? Maraming mga pinamimigay na bigas eh. Pinamimigay yung mga bigas. Tingnan niyo yung mga politiko. Ano mga pinamimigay nila? Bigas. Ibig sabihin marami siguro supply ng bigas. But how come the market prices are still high? Dapat yan pababa.
Kung maraming supply.
Binibigay na nga eh. So, I hope that the DA will take a look into
So may nagsasamantala, sir?
Hindi ko nga alam eh, but there's something wrong. There's something wrong. Dapat yan naturally, kung talagang free market forces yan, dapat yan bumababa. Kasi ang pinamimigay na po ng mga politiko, puro bigas. Therefore, ang daming bigas.
Sir, wala bang danger na yung ilalabas ng NFA na nasa mga warehouse nila, bilhin din naman ng ilang mga unscrupulous trader at siyempre mababa nilang mabibili.
Yan. Iba na yan. Bantayan na lang na mabuti. Yan na. Ginagawa natin lahat ito to release the stock na nasa NFA warehouses para mabenepisyuhan ng ating mga kababayan. Yan, DA na yan, dapat DA. Tapos, when we free this space sa warehouse, may pera tayong binigay sa NFA to buy now from Filipino farmers. New stock. That's the idea. Ultimately, pinapabenefit natin Filipino farmers and the Filipino consumer. Dapat gano'n.
So dapat ang DA has to do something about the discrepancy na binanggit nyo. Na daming bigas, pero yung...
Daming bigas.
Nataas ang presyo.
Nataas ang presyo. There's some, unless na-overstate ko yung observation ko, but that is my observation. Pinamimigay na po ang bigas. Therefore, kung can afford mag-donate ng bigas, maraming bigas.
Kung maraming supply,
dapat bumababa presyo.
So ito sir, trabaho ng DTI?
DTI and DA also. DA, kasi yung mga import sa DA.
Okay, no more? On that note, marami pong salamat sa
use the party name. Sir, kuha lang ng reaction niyo po. Thank you.
Yung kaso namin sa COMELEC was about the leadership of the party. Isira pala ulo nila, sasabihin nila sa akin na hindi pa nila ako kinikick out sa party. Tapos aangal sila na ando pa sa existing stationery ko yung PDP laban, di ba?
So may karapatan pa kayo sir na
Well, under dispute pa yung
Sa Supreme Court.
Yung decision ng COMELEC na sila kusi naman ang nagwagi, under dispute pa sa Supreme Court. So malay natin, marireverse pa yan. And then at the same time, si kusi mismo sinasabihan ako na hindi naman daw nila ako in-expel sa partido nila. Ayoko lang makasama sila, pero hindi nila ako in-expel. So bakit aangan ngayon sila kung gamit ko pa ang PDP laban na partido ko namang tunay yan, partido ng father ko, at ako nagbumuhay niyan hanggang sa time ng kaso ng COMELEC.
Sir, sinabi rin po nila na refrain from misusing the name PDP Laban and misleading daw the Filipino people about your current party affiliation kasi daw po nag-transfer na kayo sa nationalista.
Well, yung nationalista certificate of nomination ko, that was with the National Assembly kasi kami ng PDP laban ko yung wing ko, yung faction ko pa, yung originals. Nag-National Assembly kami and they gave me permission as well as si Senator Manny Pacquiao na for purposes of the May 2025 elections, we can use another party's CONA. So lahat po yan anticipated na namin yan, lahat po yan covered na po namin. So we are still with PDP laban. In case we win the case sa Supreme Court, we are ready to assume leadership, legally speaking, of our own party. But in the meantime, yung paggamit namin ng other parties CONA, allowed by our original faction of the PDP Laban in a National Assembly, very specific, plus alam din po nung hosting party. Alam po.
So, sir, you are running under what party?
Ngayon, Nationalista Party.
NP.
NP.
So, yung PDP na ginagamit nyo, PDP Laban, yung kanilang mga senatorial candidates, hindi nyo ini-endorso?
Hindi. Hindi namin ini-endorso yun. May kaso pa kami sa Supreme Court.
And then, anong dating sa inyo, sir, nung mga nagiging parang patutsadahan, batikusan yung remarks ni former President Duterte na patayin yung 15 senador para makapasok yung kanyang pambato sa senatorial race. Anong dating sa inyo, sir, noon?
Delikado yung mga ganong salita, sana i-discourage na yun. Although sabi ko, paubayan na natin yan sa mga investigators, kasi pwede nga pasok talaga yan din sa sedition ba yun? When you call for violence against government officials, pasok kasi yan sa definition ng sedition. So, paubayan na natin sa DOJ, sa NBI, if they feel na in the totality of the circumstances, may kaso ba o wala. Pero, natin yan, i-discourage natin yan. Mahirap yung sasabihin, joke lang. Kung mag-research kayo ngayon, may kaso ngayon sa Australia, yung may dalawang nurses na of Arab origin, nag-anti-Jewish sentiment sila sa online. Ngayon, binabalikan sila, sabi nila joke only. Ang sabi ng mga Australian law enforcers doon at saka government officials, hindi pwedeng bayaan natin itong mga ganitong delikadong mga pananalita na calling for violence.
Pero the mere fact na dating ang Pangulo, dapat hindi natin inaasahan yung mga ganong pananalita sa kanya.
Ayun na nga, pero nung Pangulo siya, madalas din natin marinig yun.
Sir, di ba yung Presidential Decree 1727 again penalizes bomb jokes?
Yes. Merong
so, pwede siya doon?
I do not know the context ng bomb joke yata. Anywhere ba yan? Or in the airport context yata?
Mukhang anywhere, if I'm understanding this right, 1727.
I'm no longer familiar with the PD. So, yun na nga. Kaya nga sabi ko, the DOJ, the NBI must be more familiar with all of the other criminal laws.
Okay.
Pero, sir, hindi factor kung na-feel threatened yung mga senators. Kasi, for example, si SP, ang sinasabi niya, hindi naman sila na-threaten, yung mga senador, wala naman nagko-complain among the senators, so dapat wala na daw kaso yan.
Hindi naman ito parang private crime alam ko yung mga ganyang prinsipyo sa private crime lang yan na kailangan yung tao mismo apektado ang magrereklamo. So this is actually in the nature of a public crime if it is a crime. Kaya i-ano ko na muna. Wala akong expertise na doon sa bomb joke law. So PD, ano sabi? Just give us time, i-research din po namin. Pero sana ginagawa na ng DOJ at saka ng NBI yung research.
So, bagamat sabi niyo dapat dinidiscourage yung gano'ng mga statement, pero knowing the former president, hindi po kayo na-threatened sa ganong pahayag ng dating Pangulo?
Hindi ako threatened na sinabi niya. Ang problema kasi is may mga followers siya eh.
May danger, sir.
Malay mo, hindi nila alam sa yung iba, hindi joke yun.
Sir, nagsabi na po kasi NBI na hindi naman nila iimbestigahan.
Hindi ko na ima-micromanage ang NBI. Kung ayaw na ng NBI, so be it. So be it.
Pero sir, yung mga negative campaigning, according kasi kay COMELEC Commissioner George Garcia, under Omnibus Election Code, parang inaalaw yun. Do you think it's about time i-amend ang Omnibus Election Code para ma-dissuade na yung mga negative campaigning?
Yung positive, ito nga, napansin ko na yung negative campaigning noon pa, kaya research ko na yan noon pa, mga 3 elections ago pa o 4 elections ago. Yung positive campaigning, kailangan mo identify sarili mo, di ba? Kunyari, mag-aalalagay ka ng ad o maggagawa ka ng mga printed materials, paid for by, paid for, then the candidate paid by, then the payor plus the name and address. Dapat ang negative campaign ganun din. Kung sakaling ipi-place ang mga negative campaign, kasi tama siya, pagbasa ko rin ng election code doon, allowed. But, ang problema nila, pinapayagan nila yung mga pailalim na tira eh. Dapat, pag may negative campaigning ka, ilabas mo na rin. Dapat nandun, paid for and paid by. Pero malabo yung paid for. Siguro, paid by. Kasi it's against a candidate. Ilabas. Dapat hindi pwedeng nakatago. Because it is actually allowed.
So, okay lang na allowed yun, sir.
Pero proper na negative campaign. Wag botohin si pwede yun. Pero wag yung mga chismis or whatever, libelous. May kaso ka pa rin.
Okay. JC.
Hi, Sen. Good morning po. Other topic lang po.
Yes.
SC sets or oral argument on Maharlika Investment Fund po. Sir, Sen, nakatanggap na po ba kayo ng kopya po ng SC Reso with regard po dun sa oral arguments po?
Mahal.
Yung council namin, mag-meeting na kami. Nakita ko na, nabasa ko na rin yung gusto nila mga topics na i-discuss.
Okay. Any other question? Okay.
Sir, ano na pong update dun sa kaso po ninyo sa Marikina?
Okay. Ang case naman sa Marikina, hindi naman ako yung affected, di ba? Kasi
yung kalaban ninyo.
ang na-disqualify si Mayor Marcy Teodoro ng division. So I think he has appealed it sa MR, ang tawag dyan, motion for reconsideration, which is treated as an automatic appeal sa NBank. So it's pending sa NBank. Siguro bumibuelo lang ang NBank kasi may dalawang nag-retire eh. So may dalawang new appointees. So bigyan din natin ng time yung dalawang new members na acclimatize.
Sir, paano yun kung nakalagay na po siya dun sa balota?
Okay lang po yun. Actually, it's safer na nandun ang pangalan kasi mas madali na yung if you are disqualified, sasabihin lang ng COMELEC, we will not count. We will not count your votes, or even if your votes are counted, they will not be given any effect. So, yun. So mas safer yung may andun yung pangalan kaysa sa wala yung pangalan, tapos sasabihin ng higher court na hindi pala siya disqualified, hindi mo na mapiprint yun. So, that's the more cautious way of doing things, na i-print mo muna lahat ng pangalan, tapos may time naman sa dulo pa, kahit ano yung resulta, you can say na walang effect yung boto nung disqualified.
Pero sir, the mere fact na incumbent mayor po itong kalaban ninyo, mabigat po bang kalaban kapag nakaupo yung kalaban sa...
undefeated ito eh. Mabigat. He is an undefeated politician in Marikina. Pero hindi yun ang issue. Ang issue rito is in running as a member of the House of Representatives, hawak pa ba niya lahat ng qualifications? Kasi he did something, he moved to another district. Yun eh. He moved this registration to another district. Yun. So pagbalik, na-violate na yung 1-year residency requirement.
So anong plano nyo? Paano nyo dadalhin, sir, yung kampanya nyo? Considering na ang kalaban nyo nakaupong mayor ng Marikina.
That traditional way lang of campaigning, winning the hearts and minds of the people. So, may track record naman si Mayor as Mayor, may track record naman ako as public servant, as legislator. Ang tinatakbuhan namin is as legislator. So, pwede na. Meron din tayong K.
At the mere fact na at the mere fact na legitimate na taga Marikina kayo, sir.
Ay, opo. 50 years na po ako dyan sa Marikina.
How many voters do you have in Marikina?
Doon sa District 1, 130,000. Sa buong Marikina would be around 300,000.
Sir, may patanong lang si Nympha. Yung request nyo na magkaroon ng caucus yung mga senadora, susulatan nyo po ba si SP Cheese at ano yung subject ng second letter nyo sa kanya?
Kung pwede kong ma-personal makausap si Cheese, sasabihin ko na. Pero yung sasabihin ko sa kanya, i-reduce ko pa rin in writing. Okay. So mag-request ako ng caucus para ma-explain niya yung position niya sa mga senators, bigyan niya rin ako ng time i-explain ko yung position ko. So yun po yung laman ng aking second letter sa kanya.
So hanggang ngayon, wala pang initial response si SP doon sa unang letter niyo sa kanya?
Wala pa in writing. In writing, pero nandun na yun. Sinagot na yata ako sa press con. Kaya So ganoon na lang. Magsagutan na lang kami sa media.
Pero kung nandito siya, sir, kakausapin mo personally.
Okay naman kami ni SP Cheese.
SP, andito ka ba ngayon?
Pag-akyat, same floor naman kami. Di bandaanan ko na siya.
Okay. Any additional question? No more? Okay.
Sir, there's a new PCO secretary.
Yeah.
Who I understand is
Other staff, dati mong staff.
what do you mean?
Tinext ko nga siya Sabi ko, ginulat mo man ako rito. Hindi ko alam na. Si Cesar, kaibigan ko rin yun. Kumpare ko yun. Kasama ko sa National Youth Commission si Cesar. Pero, sure na ba yun? Is that confirmed already? Si Jay?
Cesar Chavez already announced.
Na si Jay na is the answer.
Knowing Jay bilang dating staff, is he qualified for that position?
Yes, of course. Kilala nyo rin si Jay, di ba? You know him, and then you work with the giant media company, and he's also Ilocano. Di ba?
So you think that was a factor?
But I don't think so, kasi si Cesar naman sa Bicolano. So, hindi. It wasn't a factor, pero he's qualified, si Jay.
Sir, may implication ba yun? Yung madalas na pagpapalit ng PCO? Parang may problema ba?
Baka mahirap i-manage ang opisinang yan. Hindi ko alam Wala akong personal knowledge sa politics ng mga ng media So baka mahirap patakbuhin yung opisina na yan. Kasi actually ang PCO kasi parang pinagsasamang iba-ibang, 'di ba? Napansin natin sa budget process yan Iba-ibang mga opisina pilit na pinagsasama sa isang departamento. So I hope si Jay can do it with his pleasing personality. I-PR niya lahat yan, pagtyagaan niya lahat yan. So, hintayin na lang natin. We wish him all the best. No?
And then the new, DOTR secretary, sir. Sa tingin niyo madali makakalusot yun sa CA?
Sa tingin ko.
Dating staff din ng mga dating staff.
Nila Alan naman yan. Yeah, so basta alam ni Vince yung pinapasok niya. I mean, ganun din yan. Parang same nature na like a PCO yan kasi iba-ibang air, rail, land, water, transportation, sea, iba-iba rin. So iba-ibang disciplines. So we wish the new members of the President's Cabinet, we wish them all the best kasi isang bansa lang naman tayo. So we want our government to succeed because our country will also benefit and our people. So.
Ay sir, starting today, in-implement na yung National Food Emergency ba yun?
Disposal, the movement of those nakastock. Pamigay na yan or ipamigay or ibenta na yan at very affordable prices habang pwede pa siya sa fit for human consumption pa. Pero ito lang po yung aking bigla ko lang itong naisip Yung presyo ng bigas sa merkado Hindi ba parang artificially high din siya? Bakit ko nasasabi yun? Maraming mga pinamimigay na bigas eh. Pinamimigay yung mga bigas. Tingnan niyo yung mga politiko. Ano mga pinamimigay nila? Bigas. Ibig sabihin nun, marami sigurong supply ng bigas. But how come the market prices are still high? Dapat yan pababa.
Kung maraming supply.
Binibigay na nga eh. So, I hope that the DA will take a look into
So may
this.
nagsasamantala, sir?
Hindi ko nga alam eh, but there's something wrong. There's something wrong. Dapat yan naturally, kung talagang free market forces yan, dapat yan bumababa. Kasi ang pinamimigay na po ng mga politiko, puro bigas. Therefore, ang daming bigas.
Sir, wala bang danger na yung ilalabas ng NFA na nasa mga warehouse nila, bilhin din naman ng ilang mga unscrupulous trader at siyempre mababa nilang mabibili?
Oh, no, yan. Iba na yan. Bantayan na lang ng mabuti. Yan na, ginagawa natin lahat ito to release the stock na nasa NFA warehouses para mabenepisyohan ng ating mga kababayan. Oh, yan, DA na yan. Dapat DA. Tapos, when we free this space sa warehouse, may pera tayong binigay sa NFA to buy now from Filipino farmers. Yung new stock. That's the idea. Ultimately, pinapabenefit natin Filipino farmers and the Filipino consumer. Dapat gano'n.
So dapat ang DA has to do something about the discrepancy na binanggit nyo. Na daming bigas, pero yung...
Daming bigas.
Nataas ang presyo.
Napakataas.
Nataas ang presyo. There's some, unless na-overstate ko yung observation ko, but that is my observation. Pinamimigay na po ang bigas. Therefore, kung can afford mag-donate ng bigas, maraming bigas.
Kung maraming supply,
dapat bumababa
ang presyo. So ito, sir, trabaho ng DTI?
DTI and DA also. DA.
Okay, so mga kaibigan, sa oras na alas 8:49 po ng gabi Philippine Standard Time, napanood po natin yung ginawang kapihan sa Senado na yun nga po tungkol sa partido at para yata tatakbo yata sa lungsod ng Marikina ito si Senator Coco Pimentel, no? At ang makakalaman niya si Mayor Marcy Chodoro. At di pa natin alam kung sino pa ang tatakbo ron sa Marikina kasi matagal na tayo hindi nakakapag-cover doon, no? At hindi natin alam kung sino pa makakalaban niya. Well, mga kaibigan, tuloy-tuloy tayo. Ituloy na natin, isagad na natin, ano? At yung pong nangyari namang ginawang forum dyan sa Pandesal Forum, ito tungkol naman po yata dyan po sa military bases dito sa atin sa Pilipinas. Alamin natin, kasi may guest pong foreigner, no? Itong si Will Flores, no? Tama ba? Oo. Si Will, no? Will ba? Will. Oo. Yung pong host at moderator ng Pandesal Forum dyan sa Kamuning Bakery, no? Oo, alamin natin ano ba nangyari dito sa senaryo rito. Narito po.
Welcome to a very unique edition of Pandesal Forum. We have with us today a very distinguished peace advocate, Mr. Sean Connor. Sean Connor is from the International Peace Bureau. He is the executive director of International Peace Bureau, which was founded in 1891 and a Nobel Peace Prize winner, one of the world's oldest and most dynamic peace organizations with over 300 member organizations in 70 countries. The IPB is planning an international conference in the Philippines next year. We will ask him also about their plans. This is the first visit of Mr. Am I correct in the pronunciation? Sean Connor. Sean Connor is originally from Rochester, New York. Now he is based in Berlin, Germany. He used to be busy also in peace and NGO activities in Nicaragua and other places in the world. The background of Mr. Sean Connor He holds a bachelor's degree in intercultural and critical communication studies from the State University of New York at Geneseo, and a master's degree in intercultural conflict management from Ali Salomon Hochschule. I don't know. Hochschule, yes. Before joining International Peace Bureau, he worked with the Center for Cross-Cultural Study in the United States and in community development efforts in the now still war-ravaged country of Nicaragua. This is Sian's first visit to the Philippines. His visit to Manila marks the beginning of preparations for the 2026 International Peace Bureau World Peace Congress, which they plan to hold here in the Philippines next year. This is the first time the International Peace Bureau, the first time in 100 years history of IPB, that the World Peace Congress will take place in Asia. Later on, Mr. Connor will mention that. We'd like to invite Mr. Sean Connor to give us an opening statement about what's happening with the world today, what his analysis, his views of war and peace prospects for the world in 2025 under the new U.S. President Donald Trump and under the current geopolitical and economic situation of the world. Welcome to Pandesal Forum and welcome to the Philippines here at 86-year-old Kamuning Bakery Cafe. Before opening statement, I'd like to remind our media people to please prepare all your questions. He is ready to answer your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me here today. It's, as mentioned, my first time in the Philippines, and I've learned so much already in the few days that I've been here from our amazing community of IPB members and beyond. So just very happy to be with you all. I'd like to start off my remarks with a quote from UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. This is a quote I've been using now for over a year. It's from his new Agenda for Peace, which was published in 2023. And I think it's just a very apt way of summarizing the state of the world as we see it now. So here's the quote. "We are now at an inflection point. The post-Cold War period is over. A transition is underway to a new global order. While its contours remain to be defined, leaders around the world have referred to multipolarity as one of its defining traits. In this moment of transition, power dynamics have become increasingly fragmented as new poles of influence emerge, new economic blocks form, and axes of contestation are redefined. There is greater competition among major powers and a loss of trust between the global north and south. A number of states increasingly seek to enhance their strategic independence while trying to maneuver across existing dividing lines." The reason I start with this quote is because we are in many ways in unprecedented times. There are several references we can refer to of how the moment we're facing now relates to the past, but there are also many new factors into the equation that really make it unpredictable of where we might be heading next. Donald Trump, for example, returning to the U.S. presidency, is a symptom of these changes in many ways, as are the political movements that we're seeing in various parts of the world, including where I currently reside in Germany. And I'm sure to many degrees it is also present here in the Philippines and in Manila. Some of the factors that have led us to this point and which will be driving the direction that we move forward to are a proliferation of wars and conflicts, including old wars that never seem to end or have a true peaceful and just solution to them, whether it be in Ukraine, Gaza, Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, Myanmar, Somalia, Syria, Libya, so on, so forth. We see more conflicts than perhaps any other time in recent history, and that they're being conducted in new or different ways than conflicts of the past. We also see escalating global tensions between superpowers as the economic and soft power of the United States seems to be fading in many parts of the world, as well as its European allies. We can look, for example, at the Sahel countries in Africa, where several countries, Mali, Burkina Faso, have removed French and U.S. forces from their countries in search of other options to deal with the internal problems they're facing, whether it be from terrorist or insurgent groups or the economic woes that they face as well, and seeking to assert themselves more dominantly within their region and internationally. We also see here in the Asia Pacific region, of course, expanding competition between the US and China. I don't think I need to tell anyone here about the situation in the West Philippines or South China Sea, as well as the Taiwan Straits. We see US military bases and military presence circling China throughout the Pacific region, and increasing presence of US military and its partnerships with other countries in the region to push forward this change. But of course, we also see an expanding Chinese military presence. We see more and more investment from China in its military, including in its nuclear weapons. And while there is still at this point dialogue between the US and China, and there is limited competition when we see the recent tariffs that have come into place, there is still hope for some change in this regard. However, it should be noted that the rhetoric that's being used, particularly in the West, is increasingly seeming like that of a new Cold War. We saw with the Cold War of the 20th century, for example, the term of capitalism versus communism as sort of the driving factor of one side versus another, although, of course, this is always an oversimplification of the reality. The rhetoric that we are now seeing in the West is one of democracy versus authoritarianism. Once again, an oversimplification of the reality, as the West has many allies who would be considered authoritarian over normal lenses, and the authoritarian lens that they put through their supposed strategic rivals is not necessarily monolithic or the same across those countries. However, this is something I've noticed in how we receive our media, particularly in Europe and the United States. Beyond that, we also have increasing military expenditure to unprecedented levels. The latest figures that we have from the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute from 2023 estimated the total military expenditure at 2.4 trillion US dollars. And this amount is expected to increase significantly when the figures are released for 2024. Those figures should be released in April, so we were waiting for those to come in. At the same time, we see cuts to many social programs, particularly in the countries that are spending the most on the military. And we see, if we look at a division of who is spending the most on the military, by far the largest is the United States, followed by Russia and China. However, if we look, for example, at the G7 countries, some of the richest countries in the world, the G7 altogether spends over half of the total on military expenditure. At the same time, we also see new and unregulated military technologies being used actively on battlefields and preparations for their further use in future conflicts. Whether we look at Gaza or Ukraine, we see unmanned aerial vehicles or drones, which now I suppose are no longer just aerial, but also in the sea and on land. So we see all forms of drones that are coming out, as well as autonomous weapons systems. And these technologies have no real international regulation on how they can be used in battlefield. There is no regulation on who makes a decision over what is a legitimate target or not. And even worse than, there is no accountability if these weapons are used to kill innocent civilians and make the decisions without a human in place to make the decisions, there is no accountability for that killing. And if we look at those who are really studying these issues deeply, we find they are raising extreme concerns and say that discussions that are currently being held in international and regional fora do not even address sufficiently the concerns that are out there for these new weapons. We see an expansion of nuclear weapon arsenals, what's referred to in the West as modernization of nuclear weapons, and we also see their proliferation in nuclear sharing arrangements, including U.S. nuclear weapons in, 5 or 6 European countries, as well as now Russia's expansion of its nuclear arsenal into Belarus. And there is talk, of course, of further nuclear umbrellas spreading into Japan, South Korea, and even Australia across the Asia-Pacific region. One particular organization that has been raising the alarm for a long time is the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. They have just, I think 2 weeks ago now, released the latest doomsday clock, which has us at 89 seconds to midnight, which is the closest we have ever been. Midnight is what they refer to as nuclear apocalypse, or the end of civilization as we know it. And we also see increasingly the use of proxy forces to fight wars when rich countries do not want to fight them themselves. There's a failure of international law to restrict conflict and to prevent further conflict from breaking out, as well as pushing for negotiations or negotiated solutions. We see the United Nations and other international bodies incapable of really addressing this expansion of wars and warfare. Yet this is not to say they're not trying. And one particular event that occurred last year was the United Nations Summit of the Future. We as IPB were present there to provide our insights into how we can reform the United Nations to make it more effective and to more aptly represent a global community, including reforms to the Security Council, more power given to the General Assembly, and a reliance on what we call common security. And I don't know if I'm taking too much time here, so I'll just quickly go a little bit into common security before we can open up to questions. I do have a copy of our latest text here with us, but for those that might be unfamiliar, because this is one of our central campaigns, I'll outline a bit of the history. Common security is a concept that originated in 1982 during the height of Cold War confrontation between the Eastern and Western blocs. At the time, it was primarily focused on Europe, with the idea that came out that no one country, nation, or peoples can make themselves safe and secure at the expense of another. That the efforts that are made to boost or bolster one's own security in the end can harm their security because adversaries can see that as a threat to their own security. Therefore, the solution that was proposed, and this was by a panel of experts led by the former Prime Minister of Sweden, Olof Palme, was that we have to create our security together. We have to find ways to build trust, to lower distrust, including fears over the use of weapons or attacks against one another. And so they outlined several ways in which this could be possible, including, among others, nuclear and conventional disarmament. These discussions contributed to new agreements that were reached between the Eastern and Western blocs that, for example, limited intermediate range nuclear forces across Europe, which lowered tensions and led to a détente, which helped to bring the first Cold War, if we can call it that, to an end. We revitalized this concept in 2022, 40 years on from the original report, with support from the International Trade Union Confederation and the Olof Palme International Center, which is the foundation that has been named after this former prime minister who brought the idea to life in the first place. We wanted to actualize it for the 21st century, including by integrating the concept of human security and the importance of a focus of a security beyond national or militarized security, to understand that security, as we define it, is really what makes us as people, as societies, as communities feel safe, which is so much more than a simple military defense, but our well-being within our societies. This includes concepts like climate change and how climate change and pandemics such as the COVID-19 pandemic are cross-border and cannot be easily contained within the borders of any one country, nor can they be regulated and prevented by any one country alone. But of course, we also maintained the key of the work, which is building trust between countries, finding ways to reduce those tensions, disarmament, and dialogue and understanding. More recently, this was October of last year, we released the reports with our community of experts in the Asia-Pacific region on common security in this region in particular, because we also understand that there's no one policy that can be implemented worldwide that can resolve all the problems, but we need to address this within regional spaces. And so with this report, which includes an article by the Philippine professor Walden Bello, we have began to touch on, it's not a final project, but a step towards a conversation that we'll have together, the steps that we can take in the Indo-Pacific region, also noting the international ties to other parts of the world to reduce those tensions and to build a policy of common security for the region. The report is available on the International Peace Bureau IPB website, ipb.org. You'll go to our publications tab and you should be able to find it under there. Sadly, I did not have enough space in my suitcase to bring copies to distribute here. But I do have one copy, so if anyone would like to take a look at it, you're welcome to. I think I'll end my opening remarks there, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Connor, for your very insightful overview of what's happening in the world in terms of peace and threats to stability and harmony. It's like a crash course on geopolitics, strategic challenges to the world. Very amazing. I thought I already knew a lot, but in just a few minutes, he was able to summarize, I think, the state of peace in the world today. There's a question here. You are all welcome to ask questions. There's a question here from a columnist and radio host watching via Facebook Live. She's also, I think, a former beauty queen, a granddaughter of a former president also, Miss Cory Quirino. She said, question for Mr. Sian Connor, does the International Peace Bureau have intergovernmental relations that can influence Indo-Pacific foreign policy on issues that impact on peace, more specifically peace in Southeast Asia due to the escalating tensions in the West Philippine Sea between Philippines and China? What can different groups do to help influence foreign policy to promote peace and lessen the tensions in this region? From Ms. Cory Quirino, she is host of the radio program Kaya Mo Yan at the DCRS radio station and also columnist of the Daily Tribune newspaper. She's a very prominent media personality.
Thank you for that question. And it reminds me, whenever I have these talks, I seem to always forget to explain a bit more of how IPB as an organization works. We are an international network of peace and peace-related organizations, as well as individual activists, individual scholars and academics, and anyone else who is concerned about the state of the world and wants to support peaceful policy. So it's a very diverse group, but because we are a network, our primary function is to bring the network together for discussions and for rallying the international community. And what this can look like in practice, for example, is our membership. We have around 400 organizations now and around 1,000 individuals, all with different expertise, all with different focuses, and all with different connections. So several of them do have direct ties to the governments who can speak to members of parliament or Congress or whatever system it may be in the country to express their concerns. That is one way that they may take action. Other groups may be much more on the streets, protesting and building that pressure from more of a grassroots level. Still others are perhaps educators and are bringing these ideas into discussion in the classroom. We have certain campaigns that sort of guide this work, but particularly when it comes to reaching out to government officials, we do rely a lot on our community to help us with this outreach. In the Asia Pacific region in particular, we do have some of these connections. I won't go into too much details because some of it is maybe a bit more behind the scenes and something not to be shared so publicly. We do have some connections. We are working to build more connections because we do find these discussions to be an absolutely vital part of the work going forward. But several countries in the region we have the connections with, and also one of our more recent approaches is that we are hoping to form greater connections with regional bodies such as ASEAN in the Asia Pacific region, or the African Union in Africa. So we also find that those regional connections or those intergovernmental forums are really important places for these dialogues to be had. What can people do, I think, was another part of that question. First and foremost is, of course, informing oneself, whether it be through our materials or the materials that our members here in the Philippines or in other countries, wherever you may be based. You can find our list of members, the organizations, on our websites, and to be in contact with them because they are what makes IPB effective, is our membership. So being in touch with them, attending international meetings, people-to-people connection are very important. So even when we may disagree with government policies in certain countries, one or another, understanding that government policies versus the understandings of people can be very different. And even when we disagree, to come into contact with each other and get to know each other is a very important step to fostering the first steps that are needed for the trust. Becoming active with local organizations, educating others, having conversations with those in our communities to understand, among others, one of the questions I like to usually ask is what makes you feel safe? What makes you feel cared for in your community? Because we cannot disconnect what is happening internationally with what's happening on the local level. They're two sides of the same coin, and what happens on the local level can reverberate internationally and vice versa. Different activists may have a different part that calls them into focus. For me, I've always been more interested in the international level, but some people thrive at the community level. So I think finding the place that's right for you within the grand scheme and having conversations are the most important steps.
Thank you very much for your answer, and thank you to Ms. Cory Quirino for those questions. Any questions you'd like to ask? Yes.
Hello. Hello. Hi, Mr. Sean. My name is Just Ignacio from Abante Radio. I just wanted to get your thoughts about this. So American troops have been seen here in the military bases here in the Philippines, and protesters have been rallying in Manila, where U.S. Embassy is there, and Japan Embassy is also there. I just wanted to get your thoughts. Because these protesters have been protesting or rallying about how these American troops are only triggers the tension between China and the Philippines. What can you say about this? Any thoughts about that? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. And it's a great opportunity to also plug that we have, in coalition with many international partners, including World Beyond War, an International Day of Action Against Military Bases planned for February 23rd, so just in a few weeks. And we are also in contact with some of these groups in the Philippines that are protesting. We absolutely believe that the extended presence of U.S. troops throughout the Asia Pacific is increasing tensions in the region. When we go back to common security, it's about the threat perception. When you have foreign troops on your soil close to a country that is seen as an adversary, that is something that erodes the trust, because you question, what are these troops doing there? Why are they so close when they're so far away from their own borders and their own national security? So for us, this is absolutely an issue, and we call for a removal of these U.S. military bases in the Philippines and across the region. We also have to look at the other consequences of military bases in the region beyond the tensions, and this includes drastic effects on the environment. Military bases are riddled with pollution, and we see especially U.S. bases in many places when they carry out exercises, they use a flame retardant, for example, that contains these polyfluoral, I forget the term here, was it PFAS? Yes, there we go, thank you, which are forever chemicals which can seep into the soil and even into groundwater. And in places from Germany to Japan, we have colleagues who have tested the level of these forever chemicals, and they are far above the recommended levels for drinking. They can end up in fish and wildlife populations as well. We also see, for example, the U.S. military base expansion that's going on in Okinawa, which is threatening the biodiversity of the oceans and the populations there. Or in Guam, where about a third of the island of Guam, which is a territory of the United States, but not a state or anything of that sort, has taken on land that was traditional burial grounds and traditional of cultural importance to the people of Guam. So we see far-ranging consequences, not the least of which is, of course, the increase in these tensions. And for this reason, we believe there is no strong argument for these military bases continuing to be present. And even the removal of these bases could act as a step towards building trust between the United States and China, as well as the partners in the Philippines and the surrounding countries for the Asia-Pacific region as a whole.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. What day is it? February 23. It's called International. Can you repeat again what day is this?
Yep, it's the International Day Against Military Bases.
Military bases. How many? Somebody asking, watching, journalists watching via Facebook Live. How many foreign bases in the world scattered worldwide right now? Do you have an estimate? All these foreign military bases worldwide.
So the exact figure is a bit hard to calculate for a few reasons. Primarily because sometimes countries don't like to admit the presence of their military, or they may have some soldiers that are present at a military base that is technically the military base of another country, but that they are given permission to use for certain aspects of their work. However, we do have partners who have created an estimate, and the U.S. alone has nearly 800 foreign military bases around the world. Few other countries have foreign military bases. I think China has one, and Russia has somewhere around 12, if I'm not mistaken. So there are some other presence, but nothing quite compares with the presence of the U.S. military bases around the world. And just to mention one point I forgot to mention earlier as well, is that military bases also produce high levels of CO2 emissions because of everything that is needed to run these bases. So there are also estimates of how these military bases contribute to climate change. And it's a significant amount. There's a great report out by the Scientists for Global Responsibility and the Conflict and Environmental Observatory, where you can read more.
Thank you very much for enlightening us. We have another journalist watching via Facebook Live, Mr. Freddy Lazaro of Manila Bulletin. He said, Mr. Sean Connor, what would you suggest for the Philippine government to do to keep the country safe from nuclear armaments and nuclear disaster, just in case any war in the world, what do you suggest for the Philippine government to keep the Philippines safe from nuclear armaments? Freddy Lazaro of Manila Bulletin newspaper.
I'm going to sound a little bit like I'm repeating myself, but removing the U.S. military bases would be a key step in that. Because should a war break out between the U.S. and China, the first targets will be the military bases that are closest to China, because that would be the U.S.'s ability to react quickly to China. So whether it be a nuclear or conventional attack, certainly the U.S. military bases here in the Philippines would immediately be a target in such a war. Other than that, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons is one of the best tools that we have for nuclear abolition. If I understand correctly, the Philippines is already a signatory. Is that? Yeah. But there are obligations under the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, including positive responsibilities that signatories and those who have ratified the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, or TPNW, have the obligation to speak with their allies, to speak with those countries with which they have friendly relations that have not yet signed and ratified, to push them for the complete abolition of nuclear weapons. And so I think the Philippines is in a very unique place to speak with many of its allies who have not yet signed on to join in the effort for nuclear abolition. We do understand, of course, when we talk about nuclear weapons, that it's very unlikely, if not impossible, that the U.S. would give up nuclear weapons if Russia doesn't or if China doesn't, and that efforts to remove nuclear weapons would have to be taken together step by step. Of course, at this point, the nuclear arsenals of the U.S. and Russia are much higher than any other countries, including China. So our recommendation has always been for the U.S. and Russia to begin the discussions on nuclear reductions, and when they reach a parity level with China, to include them in this discussion so that those levels of nuclear weapons continue to go down, and of course engaging other partners from India and Pakistan and Israel to France and the UK. So it has to be a step-by-step approach, but the Philippines, I think, would have a great role in nuclear abolition.
Thank you very much for those answers and questions. There's another follow-up question to what you just said. Aside from opposing foreign military bases in the Philippines and Asia in the region, what is your reaction and the IPB reaction to the presence of mid-range weapons called Typhoon or in the Philippines? Recently, I think last year, they were put in the Philippines. What is your reaction, and what is the ideal situation for the Philippines and Asia regarding mid-range weapons, missiles? I think even the president of Russia mentioned the Philippines about it. We were all shocked. Any reaction on your side?
Yeah, so for those that may not know too much about the different classes of missiles and why mid-range missiles are important, with short-range missiles, of course, as implied by the name, they cannot go so far, but they do arrive quickly to their destination. With long-range missiles, they can travel very far, but as a result, the travel time, the time it takes them to reach the destination where they're attacking, where they will strike, is much longer, which gives countries a chance to respond. The problem with mid-range weapons is that they fall directly in between. So they can reach a longer range, but they also travel fast enough where there is not a lot of reaction time, where you have to react quickly. And one of the dangers in particular around this is that some of these weapons are nuclear capable. And you may not know whether the incoming weapon has a nuclear weapon, a nuclear warhead on it or not. And this gives you not a long time to respond or to verify what may or may not be coming your way. And that is one of the big dangers of these intermediate range weapons. For that reason, during the Cold War, the INF Treaty, the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, was so important because it removed that uncertainty. Now, the U.S. withdrew under the last Trump administration from the INF Treaty, claiming that Russia was rebuilding these intermediate range weapons. Now we see the U.S. also has been building up these weapons and are bringing them back to Europe as well. Next year, they're scheduled to arrive in Germany. So again, we're finding ourselves in this situation of not having a long time to verify. This is why we believe these weapons need to be, again, removed. Not just, the INF treaty was a bilateral treaty, but perhaps at really a multilateral or international level to reduce these threats. And maybe just to say, when we also talk about artificial intelligence, there is a severe risk that AI might be involved in decision-making when such a weapon would be incoming. And if they are involved and incorrectly respond, this could lead us very quickly into the brink of nuclear disaster.
Very thought-provoking analysis and overview. Wow. So those are the threats happening now. Please feel free to ask any questions. Yes. May tao sa likod. Yes. Yes. Welcome.
Ray Casambre.
Welcome.
The Philippine Peace
Director. Please repeat for the benefit.
I would just like to get a clarification. I don't know if I heard you right. On the question about the threat presented by the U.S. military bases in the Philippines, I agree with you. You said they are certainly a threat because we would be the first targets in a war between China and the U.S. But what I heard from you, I don't know, was that I thought you said that China would strike at these because these bases give the Americans the capability to strike back. I'm sorry, that's what I heard. But it seemed to imply that the Chinese would make the first strike, which I don't agree with.
That may have been a miscommunication on my part. So, just to clarify there, it's in no way did I mean to imply one or another country would be a first strike. It's if the war were to break out, and I won't venture a guess on how the war could break out. There are a million possible scenarios, but we're still hoping we can avoid all of them. But it's not so much about a first strike and a response, but rather whatever would happen that would cause the start of the war, the bases in the Asia Pacific would be on the front lines and therefore be the first targets because they are closer. So the U.S. presence on the Pacific Islands would be close to China and therefore be their first response. And that is the reason why they would be the first targets. I hope that clarifies it. But yeah, please.
Thank you very much for that. For a follow-up question, it's the other view. It has not been mentioned, but of course, Filipinos are very concerned about the military bases in the West Philippine Sea, and you had not mentioned anything about that. Well, one view, which is not very well known, is that the Chinese justify the presence of these bases because they are defending themselves against a submarine nuclear attack from the U.S., which will not give them a capability for defense, much less for striking back. What do you think about this?
So I'm not sure if I understood the question completely. I'll try to answer, but if I don't answer it, then please let me know. I think any side of adversaries will justify their own military practices and their military buildup because of fears of the enemy. On first look, it makes sense, but that is also why we are promoting the need for mutual trust building with the response, is that, both sides see legitimate threats from the other or illegitimate threats. It doesn't matter if it's legitimate or not. It's the mere seeing a threat from an adversary that is there because there is no trust, because there is no cooperation or understanding between the countries. But every side will use that as a way to justify whatever they're doing with their own military. I mean, we also saw this, for example, in Europe prior to the formation of the European Union, that there was not trust between European countries and that they would build up their militaries against one another. But when that trust is present, when the countries have a mutual understanding together, that fear disappears and no longer are they building up their militaries against one another. So I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's from what I understood. I just want to emphasize that, you know, the mistrust and the fear of the other can be replaced.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Good morning, sir. I have two questions. I'm Blue Tank of City Style Magazine. First, you talk about common security. Would common security compound like a faction like Korea, North Korea and Russia, and then America and the European countries? Or will it deflate the faction because of common security? You know, it could be like...
Sorry, can you speak up a little bit? Louder content and volume. I would like to acknowledge pala former Senator Nikki Cotseteng. Maybe you'd like to. She's a peace advocate also.
Sir, I was asking about common security. When you said common security, would it mean like it would inflate the faction of North Korea with Russia and their allies and US and the European? So even you say that's a common security for the bad side and the right side. Would that be, or would it break down their faction? Would they start to understand each other? Or
Yeah, thank you. So there's no one direct path to common security, but it is about building understanding and breaking down the distrust between countries. So if we look, for example, at the Korean Peninsula, there you have North and South Korea who both have fear of the others. Of course, North Korea has nuclear weapons, which creates an extreme sense of fear among the population in South Korea. However, the countries historically actually had a lot more in common. And so the idea of common security when we talk about the Korean Peninsula would be, on one hand, to denuclearize the peninsula. This would mean an end to North Korean nuclear weapons, but also promises from the US and other countries not to use nuclear weapons that would be backed by verification measures, something that would build trust between the sides. Dialogue and diplomacy as the primary tools, rather than the military buildup of one possibly invading the other or launching an attack on the other. Of course, common security cannot be contained specifically between any two countries. So we also have to look at the allies of these countries, so Russia and the US and China, and those who have a stake in the country. We do have in this text a chapter specifically on the Korean Peninsula. And if I just read you, for example, the vital recommendation at the end here, says reduce conventional armaments in Northeast Asia, so not just nuclear, but also conventional, denuclearize the Korean Peninsula, establish a Northeast Asia nuclear weapon-free zone, and support the Ulaanbaatar dialogue, which is an ongoing dialogue that's happening in Mongolia for peace in the Northeast Asia region, established war prevention and peace-building forums involving all parties in the six-party talks. So this is the three direct parties in the region, plus the international parties around it. So we have Japan, US, North and South Korea, Russia, and China.
I wonder if Kim Jong-un, he's such a war freak. I hope he can, he can be involved in this common security. Anyway, my second question is, common Filipinos now are bothered by the presence of China. And, China is a persistent trespasser, but then into their mind, they're not a trespasser, but they are the passionate claimant of the West Philippine Sea. Although much temperance on the part of the Philippine military, they have been using coercion and bullying, like these water cannons and everything. So how do you, because I have friends in Zambales and said they can already see the ships of China, especially that monster ship. So what do you think, or how should the Philippines, interact with this? Because on the other side, we also have to be ready to protect Philippines. As what you said, much of the marine life has been destroyed because of the build-up of these artificial islands. So how do we solve this? How do we keep them off? Thank you.
I really appreciate the critical questions because it is very important. And the bottom line is there are no easy answers. I'm not standing up here saying this is the resolution to every problem that we have. Certainly, these are very difficult issues. The one first message I would outline, though, is we reject war as the way to resolve these because we see that war is not limited just to achieving an immediate goal, but it will affect an entire population, an entire nation, and there's never been a war that hasn't led to mass loss and catastrophe for not even just the military population, but civil populations. And so that is why we are saying we need to find alternatives. And again, there is no perfect alternative. Common security will not be a playbook to remove dictators or malicious leaders from power. And that's not what we're seeking. What we're saying is let's find ways to resolve our issues without resorting to war as the solution. If we talk about the loss of biodiversity and sea life, for example, if a war were to break out in the West Philippine Sea, certainly the loss of biodiversity will be even worse than it has already been. All of that being said, when it comes to West Philippines, South China Sea, certainly China is acting as an aggressor in this region, and we do not deny that. But again, we find that even with leaders that may have malicious or negative intentions, looking at Kim Jong-un or others, that there is still an interest in involving in international dialogue and finding creative solutions. When we look at the West Philippine Sea, again, we don't have an answer to say, do A, B, C, and all of a sudden the issue will be resolved. But we do say that entering into dialogue with China, finding ways to resolve the issue without resorting to violence while defending the interests of the Philippines is absolutely key. For one example, we could see a discussion moving forward on the demilitarization of the region. Something, if we look at why is China interested in this region, why are they claiming it's theirs? I'm sure there are many reasons, including some historical, but one of those many reasons is that they are building up their military facilities in the region. And we see this as a reaction to, on one hand, the surrounding U.S. military bases, and we see this as a way for them to bolster their own defenses. If there could be an agreement that could make China feel that they don't need to militarize this region, and that this region could be used in other ways as perhaps a shared economic zone with the countries that have claims in the region, not just the Philippines, but if we're looking at Indonesia, Vietnam, so on and so forth, to find a way that this region could be reached as an agreement between the local partners and that could make the partners feel safe and respected in the region. Those solutions have been done in other parts of the world in the past, and there are ways to do there, but it won't happen overnight, and it's something that has to be an ongoing dialogue. So that's what I would say there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have here a special guest. She's a peace advocate also. And what you said earlier about opposition to foreign bases, she's also an advocate before. There's a question here about what you just said. With Trump now in power in the U.S., and he seems to be even though he's controversial, but he has a track record of not wanting to get involved in foreign wars. Do you think your call for removal of U.S. bases across Asia and in the Philippines, the chances of it happening now under Trump, even though he's controversial, is a remote possibility? Because he doesn't like to spend money that doesn't make sense for him. So spending spending money for 800 foreign military bases all over the world seems to be contradictory to his self-interest attitude. Do you think that is a window of hope or opportunity that your call, your International Peace Bureau, your call to end foreign military bases in Asia, is it possible, do you think, under Trump, even though he's unpredictable? What do you think?
At this point, sadly, I do not see it as a possibility under Trump. One thing that has been crystal clear in Trump's rhetoric when it comes to international relations is an increasing focus on competition with China. This has been something, I mean, we've seen the recent tariffs, although that's a very small point, but several of his cabinet appointees and those in his circle, while disengaging from conflicts in other parts of the world, including the war in Ukraine, including to a certain degree, at least Gaza, in his rhetoric, although we're seeing some changes there, we have to follow the news. And of course, an end to U.S. aid. The one thing that has remained consistent is that Trump has been very confrontational to China. And this is, the quote that I read at the beginning, I think this is perfectly representative of these shifts that we're seeing in geopolitics, that with the rising economic and soft power influence of China, U.S. is facing unprecedented threats to its perceived influence on the global scale that it's enjoyed unilaterally since the end of the Cold War, first Cold War. So with these threats, I think Trump has this in mind, and I, at this point, don't see much of a hope. However, 4 years is a long time. We see what may change during this period. And I know, it's been rumored that he'll be having a call with Xi Jinping sometime this week. And as you said, he's unpredictable, so there's always some chances there. Maybe just one thing to mention here as well that is a particular concern to those who have studied political science, history, and philosophy. I'm not sure if anyone here has heard of something called the Thucydides trap. This is, coming from the Peloponnesian War, a historian writing about the conflict between Athens and Sparta, where the power of Athens, both military, economic, and general influence in the region, was waning at the time where the power of Sparta was rising. And the general thesis that was developed by this historian, and that we've seen play out several times through history, is when you have a waning power and you have a rising power, that the waning power often, we can never say always, but often will resort to military means as a way to try to defend and maintain its power and influence around the world.
What are somebody asking here, reaction to what you just said? As a peace advocate, what is your hope for the talk of Trump and Xi? What is your best case scenario when they finally talk over the phone, or if they meet? Any recommendations for them? And
it's a bit hard to address this question neutrally as a U.S. American that really does not have many hopes for Trump. Trump is a businessman. He's someone who cares about economics. I believe if there can be an underlined sense that there is an economic interest in continuing friendly relations between the U.S. and China, that could perhaps serve as a starting point. However, even with that, we have to acknowledge that both the U.S. and China, along with Russia and other large nations, are, to a certain degree, differing degrees, colonial powers that seek to have the strength and influence on an international stage. And I think really where my hope lies more is not with the US, with China, or with Russia, but rather the global south and the smaller countries which are beginning to see new ways to engage internationally. And if we do see, among other things, reform to the UN Security Council and empowerment of the UN General Assembly, that smaller states can have a greater role and greater influence in shaping what a future world order will look like, for one that creates more equality and does not benefit the larger, richer nations over the others.
Thank you very much. There's a question here from another journalist watching via Facebook Live. What can private groups and NGOs do to support your call for peace in Asia and the world in these chaotic times? And also, you mentioned February 23 is International Day Against Military Bases. What is your suggestion for prominent activists like former Senator Nikki Cotseteng over here? What can people like her and NGOs do to coordinate or cooperate with your cause for February 23?
So for the 23rd, many NGOs and organizations are organizing activities of differing varieties. As mentioned before, some of them are more protesting directly at military facilities across the world. We have partners in Germany, for example, protesting at the Ramstein Air Base, which is the air base responsible for U.S. drone strikes in the Middle East. We have groups in Lakenheath in the UK protesting directly against the U.S. military presence there. So on and so forth. So some groups are really organizing direct events, whether they be at the gates of these military bases or in popular cities or locations. Others are organizing events more such as teach-ins to educate people on why military bases are a problem. I know, even a lot of my friends may not fully understand, why are you protesting against military bases? They see military bases as something that is protecting our security. So, educating and providing knowledge to people also is something that's very important. Other groups may be launching digital or online campaigns. There's a variety of ways, and again, everyone I think has sort of their focus, their interest, where they can find a way to contribute more actively. From prominent people in particular, we do appreciate short video messages in support of the Day of Action as a way to rally more people around the cause and just show that we have, a large population around the world. Then the hope is from all of these events that you report back to us and our other partners that are co-organizing this day so that we can create a summary that shows all of the actions around the world happening on the same day. And it helps us to understand we're not a part of something small. We're not doing something just on our own basis, on our own level, but that this is really part of a global movement that we are achieving together, and that in those numbers internationally, we have greater strength.
Thank you very much. One more question here from a journalist watching. He reflected what the lady earlier said. There's a prevailing view widespread in the Philippines saying that the U.S. bases they claim is a security guard for the Philippines. They claim it's a free security guard for the Philippines. What is the real situation, and how do you analyze the presence of foreign bases here in the Philippines and Asia? And you mentioned about peace. When you campaign against all the foreign military bases, is your ideal scenario demilitarization of the region? Is it possible in our lifetime? This is a question of one journalist watching via Facebook Live now.
Yeah, as mentioned before, there are reasons why many people view military bases, even foreign military presence, as a form of security. The U.S. is the largest military in the world by far, as we know. I think there are many ways to approach this question, and different ways may appeal to different people. I'd like to again ask the question to anyone and everyone, who understands these bases as a form of protection, what is it that makes you feel safe? I think the starting point we always need to begin with is what are we afraid of? Why do we see these bases as a protection in the first place? And many people may say, you know, an aggressive China. And again, I can understand why that is, and there are aggressive Chinese military practices happening right now, and we do have to acknowledge that. The question is, you know, does having these bases really protect us from that? And what is it that, you know, they will achieve by being here? I think in general, when we find countries, if we look, for example, at Costa Rica, which abolished its military and has instead focused on funding social programs, we find a new form of safety. And you'll see, since they abolished their military, no country has tried to invade Costa Rica. And, you know, I lived in Nicaragua for some time. There are territorial disputes between Nicaragua and Costa Rica, which are ongoing to this day. Nicaragua has a military, yet there has been no invasion as a result. And typically what happens is an invasion happens when a country is feeling threatened by the military presence of the others, and they feel they need to preemptively prevent that. There are, of course, cases of colonialism, but we have not seen China expand beyond the borders it has. Of course, there are problems even within the borders it has, and we can't ignore those. But we don't see it as an expansionary force that is seeking to conquer the Philippines. The ways that we resolve our issues typically are through dialogue and debates. So that is one part I would put forward. The other part is, as mentioned before, these military bases are by no means free. The consequences that they have on the land that they're on, for the environment, for the local populations, you know, these military bases can create economic and personal dynamics in the regions. And I know the Philippines has seen victims of U.S. military personnel aggression over the years as well. It's not limited to the Philippines. We see this in Okinawa. We see this in other places where U.S. has military base presence, including in the U.S. military bases in the United States. So they're not free when we look at all of the ways that they affect us, and the way, as mentioned before, that they can then become targets should a war break out. Many countries really can have the possibility. We're not saying abolish the military necessarily, completely, but find a way to achieve security without resorting to military as the only means for security. Armed neutrality, for example, is something that many of our partners here in the Asia Pacific are exploring, including in Australia. Ways to maintain a force of self-protection, but not one that is an offensive or exploratory military force that's going beyond the country's own borders.
Thank you very much. We'd like to invite our speaker, Mr. Sean Connor, to summarize your thoughts and your appeal to the public and to the media regarding world peace, security, foreign military bases to be removed worldwide. And for your closing statement, you have enlightened us with a very interesting different topics. Thank you. Maybe you can summarize your thoughts, sir, and appeal to the public and the media. Yes.
Absolutely. Thank you all again for your time, for all the questions. And again, I do also really appreciate critical questions. We as the IPB don't claim to have all the answers to the world problems or say, you know, take these 3 steps and we're at peace. We understand it's a dialogue, it's a process that we have to work through together, including with those that may have a more militarized understanding than us. This is one of the reasons, among many others, that we are planning the World Peace Congress in the Philippines next year, is to have this dialogue with all of you, to be in discussion, to find what together can make us more safe, what can resolve the issues that we're facing, and to find creative solutions, knowing that we can have disagreements, but using militaries and using violence to resolve our disagreements and disputes is not the way forward and will only continue cycles of violence that continue to plague us all around the world. So let's explore those ideas together. Let's listen to one another, have disagreements, friendly with one another, find solutions, and together envision what a more peaceful future for the world can look like and how we get there. Thank you.
Thank you very much again to Mr. Sean Connor. Mr. Sean Connor is the Executive Director of International Peace Bureau. Thank you very much for your first visit to the Philippines and for enlightening the media and our guests here at Pandesal Forum of 86-year-old Kamuning Bakery Cafe. You should come back again and discuss your interesting and exciting plans. We'd like to present you
Okay mga kaibigan, sa oras na alas 9:58 po ng gabi Philippine Standard Time, yan po naging kabuuan ng ating itinampok ngayong pong araw ng Lunes sa ating programang Tropa. Siyempre dito lang sa Millennial Online TV, News and Updates. At yun nga mga kaibigan, yung napanood natin sa base militar, no? Hindi rin naman yun ang solusyon, sabi nung bisitang foreigner, no? Ay mga violence, etc. Kaya daw makikipag-dialogue daw sila sa susunod na taon dito raw sa atin. Ewan natin kung ano mangyayari. Anyway, mga kaibigan, muli maraming salamat sa lahat ng mga sumubaybay. Sila Nel Briones, sila Ma'am Marini Lagura ng Malabon Community Organization. At siyempre po sa lahat ng sumubaybay, sila Kuya Hero Lumen, no? May pinasya-shout out siya. Si Kuya Hero, no? Si pangalan nito. Ang pinasi-shoutout niya si Major Cariaga. Ayan, magandang gabi sa inyo, Major Cariaga, at mabuhay po kayo. Ang mga pagbati po, buhat po kay Kuya Hero Angelo Lumen. Okay mga kaibigan, muli ako po'y pansamantala magpapala muna at muli magbabalik siguro, bahala na bukas at sa ating pa rin programang Tropa. Muli ako po yung naging kasama, ROCEL Lopez. Magandang gabi Pilipinas at papayapang magdamag. Magandang gabi po.
Now,
Talakayin.
The biggest destruction of dangerous drugs worth 1.
Rebisahin, opinyon, malawakin, aksyonan. Kasama si ROCEL Lopez, ang inyong katropa sa pagbabalita. Dito lang sa Millennial Online TV. Tutok na mga katropa!
Barangay, pangunahing unit ng pamahalaan lokal kung saan dito pinag-uusapan ang bawat sinalo ng mga residente ng bawat barangay. Dito rin pinag-uusapan ng mga piling halal na opisyal na barangay ang mga proyekto para sa kanilang barangay. Kumustahin natin ang panunungkulan ni Kapitan dito sa Dalo Barangay sa Millennial Online TV worldwide, ang katropa ng bawat barangay.
Ating tinatapos ang ating pagpupulong. Maraming salamat po sa inyong pagdalo at tapos na po ang ating session. Enjoy na po tayo.
Responsable ka ng gun owner? At mahaba ba ang iyong pasensya? At hindi maintin ang iyong ulo? Alam mo rin ba ang batas hinggil sa pag-iingat ng baril o firearms? Kung hindi,
A responsible gun owner? Are you a responsible gun owner?
Are you a responsible gun owner?
Are you a responsible gun owner?
Are you a responsible gun owner?
Are you a responsible gun owner? The PNP Civil Security Group would like to advise all firearms holders to renew their license to own and possess firearms and firearms registration within 6 months before its expiry date. Tumawag na at makipag-ugnayan.
Be a responsible gun owner.
One Gun Pilipinas ang sagot mga katropa at kaganos. Tayo ituturo sa inyo ng One Gun Pilipinas o OGP ang lahat ng legal na paraan at proseso upang ikaw ay maging isang responsableng gun owners. Ano pa hinihintay nyo mga ka-gunners? Sali na sa Wandang Pilipinas. Ngayon na.
Shoutout dyan sa kaibigan natin si Sir ROCEL Lopez. Sir ROCEL, kumusta ka dyan? Guys, like and follow si Sir ROCEL. Siya ho ang ating admin at saka owner-operator ng ating napakagandang online news TV, Millennial Online TV News and Updates. Ito ay nagpo-promote guys ng mga positivity sa buhay, mga updates natin sa mga local news at saka syempre mga promotion tungkol how to live a life better. Okay? Guys, like and follow si Sir ROCEL. Sir ROCEL, ingat palagi. Bye-bye. Woo!
Hanap mo ba ay Unwind Ventures? Tara nang mamangha sa mga tanawin. Ano man ang iyong travel goals? Dadalhin namin kayo. Sa Unwind Ventures at saya. Dito lang sa Wow Biyahe. Kaya wow, di ba?
Abangan dito lang sa Millennial Online TV. Nagbabasa ka pa ba ng dyaryo? O nakikinig ka pa ba ng radyo? Kung ngayon, lahat yan ay mapapakinggan nyo na sa inyong mga cellphone. Dahil online na tayo, mga kamilenyo. Kaya manood, makinig dito sa Millennial Online TV.
Rider, sumalpok sa
Kaya
poste ng
i-follow, like, subscribe, at i-share na mga katropa. Pinaigting, pinalakas ang bagong news online TV ng bagong milenyo. Millennial Online TV, ang katropa mo sa pagbabalita.